hate this argument because I have to come up here and defend the religion of love, brotherhood, peace, justice, and turning the other cheek rather than kicking the other guy in the crotch.
Unbelievably, and I didn't think this was possible given how Peter's speech has proceeded thus far, but somehow it gets worse as it goes along.
They don't want justice. They do want the dead to be dead. They do want the universe to be purposeless.
And in a move that will come as a shock to absolutely nobody, Peter continues his tirade without reference to a scintilla or shred of evidence for the theistic proposition.
If you ever try to bullshit me like that again, I will rip off your arrows.
Thank you to my patrons. Your generosity and commitment to my work is astonishing. Please consider becoming a patron today. Simply click the link in the description below. Thank you. Hey everybody, Magic Skeptic here, and you're all very welcome to another episode of the most annoying religious people. Up for today is political commentator and Christian Peter Hitchens. Yes, that Hitchens, the brother of the great Christopher Hitchens. I tell you, it absolutely bewilders me that these two men share genetics, because Peter didn't inherit any of the wit, charm, and I dare say intelligence of his brother. But as per usual, dear listener, you can be the judge. In the speech that follows, Peter lectures the atheist community in a furious and angry manner. The question is there any substance to it? Well, let's not delay any further and dive right in. I hope you enjoy it.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I hate this argument. In fact, I loathe taking part in it almost more than any other argument I ever take part in.
I hate this argument. I loathe it so much, in fact, that I got dressed in my fanciest suit and attended the Oxford Union so that I could deliver an impassioned speech about it. That's how much I hate this argument. Seriously? Even if we assume sincerity, who cares how you feel, Peter? Surely one's feelings are irrelevant as to the existence of God. But no. Here we have Peter front-loading his speech with his alleged feelings of revulsion as though they were relevant.
I hate this argument.
But why, Peter? Why do you hate this debate so much? What bothers you so much about it? Let's hear it.
For why? Because I have to come up here and defend the religion of love, brotherhood, peace, justice, and turning the other cheek rather than kicking the other guy in the crotch.
Good grief. So the reason Peter hates this argument so much is because it requires that he defend a religion that allegedly stands for love, brotherhood, peace, justice, and turning the other cheek rather than kicking the other guy in the crotch. I use the word allegedly here because I think it would be a rather generous concession on my part to accept by default that Christianity embodies the characteristics that Peter names. I'm sure the members of the LGBTQ+ community, some of whom have and continue to live in silence for fear of ostracization, bullying, and worse, would beg to differ with Peter on the allegedly loving nature of Christianity.
Because I have to come up here and defend the religion of love.
I'm sure that all of the children who have suffered at the hands of predator priests only to have the church relocate the offenders would beg to differ with Peter on the alleged brotherhood of Christianity. Unless, of course, the kind of brotherhood Peter had in mind is one which involves doing everything in one's power to help one's brothers abscond justice.
Brotherhood.
I'm sure the denizens of medieval Europe who witnessed Christians crusading across the land would beg to differ with Peter on the allegedly peaceful nature of Christianity.
Peace.
I'm sure all of the slaves who were beaten, brutalized, and robbed of their humanity would beg to differ with Peter on the allegedly just nature of Christianity, a religion which explicitly sanctions slavery, including but not limited to specific injunctions on how to beat one's slaves, specific injunctions on how one can bequeath slaves as an inheritance to their children, specific injunctions on keeping young virgin girls as slaves specifically for the purposes of sex, etc. How just, eh? And don't get me started on turning the other cheek. Not after the list I just recounted. And before anyone jumps into the comments writing in all caps, "Those aren't real Christians. Real Christians wouldn't ostracize anyone. Real Christians wouldn't abuse children. Real Christians wouldn't murder anyone," etc. Such responses are patently absurd. Not least because they consist of little more than a no true Scotsman fallacy. Who are you to tell me what the true Christianity is? Now, you may accuse me of the same thing. You may allege that I'm lecturing you on what the true Christianity is, but that simply isn't the case. I'm not telling anyone who or what a true Christian is. I'm simply judging the faith on its track record. I'm highlighting the behavior of Christians because it conflicts with Peter's rather facile and absurd summary. And to be clear, I'm not beyond acknowledging that Christianity has done good in the world. But when one's interlocutor lists nothing but positives, I feel it's only fair to burst that bubble and issue a rude awakening to anyone who may be swallowing Peter's fantastically charitable summary. In other words, Peter's glowing review of Christianity has cast me in the role of the bubble burster. In order to establish some balance, I have no choice but to push back by shedding light on some of Christianity's seedy underbelly. I have no choice but to give you some examples of where Christianity hasn't been kind, hasn't been good, and hasn't been loving. For if I don't, we're left with this incredibly inaccurate summary of what Christianity is and what Christians have done throughout history. Suffice to say, the true picture is much more complicated and much less positive than Peter would have us believe. Worse still, even if Peter was right that Christianity is a religion which stands exclusively for love, brotherhood, peace, justice, and turning the other cheek, even if he was correct, so what? What does that have to do with its truth value? Ostensibly, Peter is frustrated because he's having to defend the truth value of his faith. And this is particularly infuriating for him because, as he sees it, his religion embodies love, brotherhood, peace, justice, and turning the other cheek.
I hate this argument because I have to come up here and defend the religion of love, brotherhood, peace, justice, and turning the other cheek rather than kicking the other guy in the crotch.
But so what? Essentially, Peter's opening comments can be paraphrased as, "I shouldn't have to defend the truth of X because X contains things I value." This is fallacious in the extreme. I can't quite believe that a fellow as intelligent as Peter Hitchens thought that this was a wise opening gambit. Please notice that the same could be said for other faiths. In fact, the exact same list of attributes could be said for Buddhism. Yet, Peter isn't defending the religion of Siddhartha Gautama here, is he? In short, whether or not Christianity embodies love, brotherhood, peace, justice, and turning the other cheek is irrelevant. All we care about, Peter, is whether or not your faith is true. So why don't you go ahead and provide some evidence and dispense with the righteous indignation?
Honestly, I mean, haven't we all heard it all before? Horus, Mithras, they're all the same. No, they're not all the same. They all disagree with each other. They must be wrong. They can't all be right. This is the stuff of sixth form debate.
They can't all be right, but they could all be wrong, is the stuff of sixth form debate? Says the guy who believes that his religion is right and all the others are wrong. Are you kidding me? Get out of here! If I put that in a movie script, if I put that in there, you would accuse me of having written an unrealistic character. You would tell me that this character isn't very believable. But here we have Peter Hitchens uttering the most ridiculous things imaginable. Get out of here, Peter! Did he even prepare his speech? Or is he just speaking off the cuff? Because this is embarrassingly bad. Again, Peter himself is a monotheist, which is to say that he believes in one God to the exclusion of all others. This entails the falsehood of the Hindu gods. This entails the falsehood of Waheguru of Sikhism. This entails the falsehood of Greek and Norse gods, etc. So evidently, Peter agrees that not all religions can be right. Not least because he thinks that his God is the one true God. But here he is pretending that such a statement is the stuff of sixth form debate. As an aside, and for non-UK listeners, sixth form is one's final year in school before heading to university. So in other words, Peter is alleging that atheist critiques are nothing more than teenage hijinks.
This is the stuff of sixth form debate.
At this point in the speech, it should be clear that Peter hasn't attended this event with the aim of convincing anyone of the truth of his faith. Rather, Peter is here because he has an axe to grind. His goal is not to change minds and hearts. His goal is to belittle and condescend. But the irony is, Peter is the one who's behaving immaturely. His feelings are front and center. His indignation is unmistakable.
I hate this argument.
And in defense of teenagers, the very people I've worked with in my capacity as a teacher for the last decade, I can assure you that I rarely encounter one as stupid and as hijacked by their emotions as Peter Hitchens is. In fact, in all of my years teaching philosophy of religion, over a decade now, I've never once had a teenager write an essay on God's existence which proposed an argument like, I shouldn't have to defend the truth of X because X contains things I value.
I hate this argument because I have to come up here and defend the religion of love.
Goodness gracious me. If anybody is behaving immaturely here, Peter, surely it is you.
There has been nothing serious said against the concept of God by the opposition this evening at all. I am expecting something serious to come from the third speaker, but there hasn't been anything so far. I'm really hoping, because it would be nice, because this is not fundamentally a serious discussion as it has been held so far from the other side. And it's not serious for a very simple reason. It's not arguing about what we ought to be arguing about. I'm going to have a little bit of poetry here for those of you who appreciate that sort of thing. It's from the 38th chapter of the book of Job. God speaks from the whirlwind, and he asks, who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, from the opposition is they haven't a clue. Nor have I. Nor has anybody in this room. We haven't the faintest idea. Nothing that any of us could say here tonight could convince anybody that they knew that God existed. What we are discussing here is a matter of opinion. And a matter of opinion, Mr. President, is a matter of choice. And the real question before us is why we choose what we choose.
Unbelievably, and I didn't think this was possible given how Peter's speech has proceeded thus far, but somehow it gets worse as it goes along. This is an incredibly confused point. So after quoting the Bible, Peter goes on to allege that nobody knows where the universe came from. Not even him. Therefore, from his perspective, it's a matter of opinion.
What we are discussing here is a matter of opinion.
I think what Peter is trying to do here is level the playing field. For if nobody knows for sure, then atheism and theism are equally rational. Now, Peter doesn't do us the service of defining what he means by the term know, but given the manner in which he deployed it, I think it's reasonable to infer that he's defining it as something like certainty.
They haven't a clue. Nor have I. Nor has anybody in this room.
Translated then, his claim becomes, nobody can say with certainty whether or not a God exists, therefore, atheism and theism are on equal footing. But this is absurd for a number of reasons. Firstly, certainty isn't required in order to form a probabilistic assessment which can inform one's belief. Consider the following. Christianity makes numerous grand claims for itself. Divinely caused virgin births, resurrections, global floods, talking snakes, walking on water, etc. These kinds of claims lower the probability of Christianity being true, not least because we have zero confirmed examples of such phenomena. But it's not just that we have zero confirmed examples, it's that we have quite a bit of evidence which runs contrary to such claims. For example, the laws of physics and basic buoyancy limitations make it nomologically impossible for humans to walk on water. Yet, Christianity would have us believe that Jesus did precisely this. Now, Christians will contend that Jesus was able to suspend the laws of physics. But such a response simply begs the question. After all, the very thing in contention is whether or not it's probable that a miracle working man walked on water. So when I point out that buoyancy limitations render this claim less likely, it's hardly a persuasive rejoinder to assert that the man in question can suspend such limitations, the very thing at issue. Suffice to say, the claim Jesus walked on water is a fantastical one. And to Peter's point, no one can know with certainty whether or not it happened. But does this mean that those who accept the claim are on equal footing with those who reject it? Of course not! Again, the evidence of our eyes and our ears leads us to the conclusion that it's unlikely. So we're not on equal footing. And the same goes for all of Christianity's fantastical claims. It may well be a matter of opinion, but some opinions, Mr. Hitchens, are informed, and other opinions are not. By way of analogy, nobody can establish with certainty the existence or non-existence of fairies. Using his own framework here, wouldn't Peter be duty-bound to erect the same argument for fairies? Wouldn't it be incumbent upon Peter to allege that fairyists and atheists are on equal footing? It's just a matter of opinion.
What we are discussing here is a matter of opinion.
In fact, and in order to be consistent, wouldn't Peter be forced to treat all currently unknowable propositions in the same way? But of course, Peter doesn't do this, because such a perspective would be absurd beyond belief. So no, I don't think Peter would be tempted to defend fairyists on the grounds that their point of view is an opinion that's on equal footing with atheists. Yet he does precisely this for his God. I wonder why he treats his God differently from other supernatural propositions. Could it be that he's engaged in special pleading? Interesting to consider. With this in mind, what we have here is an age-old defense mechanism which could be summarized as, knowledge is impossible, therefore my faith shouldn't be questioned. But as I hope I've demonstrated in this video, knowledge is not a necessary prerequisite for rationality. Even in the absence of certainty, beliefs can be more or less rational. Certainty isn't required in order to evaluate evidence and form probabilistic conclusions. But Christians like Peter Hitchens would like us to ignore all of this, switch off our brains so he can pretend that atheism and theism are on equal footing. Imagine, Peter believes in a hitherto unobserved, all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing, and unembodied mind who created the universe and sent his only begotten Son to die for our sins. And he wants you to believe that those who believe as he does are on equal footing with those who, have the audacity to doubt the existence of such a fantastical entity. Give me a bloody break. Let's move on.
And this is the most fascinating part of the argument, addressed by the most intelligent and interesting atheist, I think now living, Thomas Nagel, who asks repeatedly, why is it that I and my fellow atheists so much want there not to be a God? Why is it, ladies and gentlemen, they so much want there not to be a God? Why would you want there not to be a God? Why would you want to live in a purposeless chaos in which none of your actions had any significance, in which there was no hope of justice, in which the lives of all those whom you loved ended abruptly at death and had no further significance? Why would you want, desire, actively wish to live in a universe as disgusting as that? you'd have to have a very good reason. And I think these gentlemen do have a very good reason, and it's what they never ever wish to discuss. They don't want justice. They do want the dead to be dead. They do want the universe to be purposeless.
And in a move that will come as a shock to absolutely nobody, Peter continues his tirade without reference to a scintilla or shred of evidence for the theistic proposition. Instead, Peter waxes lyrical about the psychology of atheists. Peter implies that atheists want to live in a purposeless universe devoid of justice and hope.
They don't want justice.
Atheists want to live in a universe where death is final, etc.
They do want the dead to be dead.
These claims are as wild as they are stupid. Firstly, atheists are not some homogeneous block who all agree with one another. For example, I've met atheists who derive comfort from the fact that death is the end. Such atheists view death in the same manner that certain Buddhists do. That is, an escape from the suffering that is existence. I've also met atheists who are perturbed by the finality of death, so much so that nihilism has taken root, etc. The point is, Peter is ignorantly and arrogantly speaking on behalf of hundreds of millions of people, assuming that they all fit into a neat box, painting them all with the one brush. And it's spectacularly stupid. Not to mention the fact that desire for many atheists has nothing to do with their reasons for non-belief. Like me, such atheists have been hopelessly, I dare say, deterministically persuaded into their non-belief by arguments such as the problem of evil, or divine hiddenness considerations, or perhaps they were raised in a secular home where they were never indoctrinated to believe in God in the first place. In other words, Peter's claim that atheists are choosing to reject God via some kind of act of libertarian free will is garbage.
Why would you want, desire, actively wish to live in a universe as disgusting as that?
Furthermore, I must say I find it particularly ironic that Peter would accuse the atheist worldview of being devoid of justice when he himself believes in a religion, the central myth of which involves sacrificing a scapegoat so that the sins of others could be forgiven. And if you're a Trinitarian, it's even worse, as God sacrifices himself to himself so that the sins of others could be forgiven. I don't know about you, dear listener, but that doesn't sound particularly just to me. By definition, justice involves holding those responsible accountable for their actions, issuing a punishment which fits the crime, etc. But here we have Christianity, the central myth of which promotes the exact opposite message, that of vicarious redemption. Don't you dare lecture atheists about justice, Peter Hitchens. Not as a Christian. It would be like the church lecturing Bill Cosby on consent. And don't get me started on the afterlife. Burning in hell forever? Does that sound just? Not to mention loving? I wonder if Peter is acquainted with religious trauma syndrome and the debilitating PTSD that fear of hell can instill. And Peter wonders why some people might be relieved to be dissuaded of such a proposition. Universalists will beg to differ, of course, telling us that everyone goes to heaven. Really? Including all of the murderers and abusers and genociders? That doesn't sound particularly just either, I'm afraid. Am I saying that atheism can do any better? No, not least because atheism is content neutral. But that fact appears to have escaped Peter, as he ascribes one view after another to atheists as though we were a monolithic block who came off an assembly line.
They don't want justice.
Don't believe me? Listen to what Peter says next.
They do not want their own individual actions to have any other significance than their immediate effect. You will have to discuss with them why they should be so keen on that proposition.
And there you have it, folks. Peter Hitchens lecturing the atheist community about what it is they want. It's absolutely absurd. Notice the implication. An implication that's hurled at atheists all too often, I might add. Namely, that we want to be able to act with impunity. Atheists just want to sin. We want to be able to murder and steal without any eschatological consequences.
They do not want their own individual actions to have any other significance than their immediate effect.
And all this coming from the religion which allows its adherents to abscond justice through scapegoating and confession. So rather than make amends and be held to account for one's actions and those you've harmed, you can pile your sins upon a scapegoat and walk free. You can beg your priest or your God for forgiveness, say a few prayers, and boom, you're forgiven. The audacity of Peter to lecture atheists in this regard is bewildering to me. Remember this, Peter. We're not the ones who believe in scapegoating blood magic. We're not the ones who believe in vicarious redemption. Christianity is a religion that's defined by escaping responsibility. I dare say that what we're looking at here, folks, is a textbook case of projection. Every one of Peter's accusations is in actuality a confession. It's laughable.
God in our society stands very much against, and this is why I, after many, many years of not believing in God, came round to the view that I would choose to do so and act as if there is a God. God is the principal opposition in our society to lawless, ruthless power. To the bully, to the autocrat, to the despot, to the criminal, to the person who treats his neighbors like dirt. Fundamentally, once we have dispensed with that concept in our society, we are left with nothing. Now, the atheists don't wish to discuss this because they know exactly what I'm saying. They're very well aware of the implications of what I'm saying for society in general. They know perfectly well that if everybody didn't believe in God, the comfortable lives they live in extremely agreeable suburbs, where they can trust people not to cheat them and rob them and mug them and rape them, would come to an end. They want to keep the secret to themselves. They want to have all the joys, not just now, all the joys and all the advantages provided by Christianity, but not pay the dues.
And in closing, Peter commits an appeal to consequences fallacy, whereby he tells us that if there is no God, then we'll have no justice. We'll have no opposition to ruthless power. We'll have no opposition to corruption, etc.
And this is why I, after many, many years of not believing in God, came round to the view that I would choose to do so and act as if there is a God. God is the principal opposition in our society to lawless, ruthless power.
So what? Even if he's correct here, and the absence of God results in terrible consequences, it doesn't therefore follow that God must exist. It could just be the case that there's no God, and we're going to have to contend with those negative consequences. This is fallacious in the extreme. That said, I would question Peter's assumption here. God is the principal opposition to lawless and ruthless power? Are you kidding me? How many have and continue to be abused and killed in the name of God? Look at the history of my own country of Ireland, where, when the Catholic Church had obscene power, it resulted in the abuse and deaths of countless men, women, and children. Babies in cistern tanks. That's what the absolute power of the parties of God wrought upon Ireland, Mr. Hitchens. God is the principal opposition to lawless, ruthless power, you say? In that case, Peter, why is it that those in holy orders are the ones responsible for dumping babies into cistern tanks? I'll tell you why. Because those babies, beautiful, tender, and innocent though they were the offspring of unmarried mothers. Henceforth, they were considered the very embodiment of sin and looked down upon. So they were discarded by the people who believed in your theology, by the people you claim believe in something that's supposed to prevent ruthless power.
They know perfectly well that if everybody didn't believe in God, the comfortable lives they live in extremely agreeable suburbs, where they can trust people not to cheat them and rob them and mug them and rape them, would come to an end.
Yet here we have your comrades engaging in some of the most ruthless and despicable practices that a human being can engage in. Spare me, Mr. Hitchens. Recent inquiries have found cases of abuse in over 300 schools across the island. Not to mention those in holy orders who didn't partake in the abuse but did nothing to stop it. Not to mention higher-ranking members of the church who covered it up and relocated priests so that they could continue to abuse others. And I'm supposed to accept that belief in God is a moderating influence? A principle of opposition against lawless and ruthless power, no less. On behalf of the people of Ireland, Peter Hitchens, you.